Can Oregon really bring in the number one recruiting class in 2025? It's entirely on the table.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why if you have not already, like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review, please and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com just FanDuel.com, actually. Just visit FanDuel.com. That simple to get started. Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here, joining me for today's show. Everything Cruton, lots of five-star pursuits. Is Oregon going to get everybody that they want? And a question about the 2024 class coming up later, brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Brian, let's start with the big question right now that On3 has posed and Steve Wiltfong has talked about, and I've just kind of wondered as well. Can Oregon bring in the number one recruiting class in the country in 2025?
Plausible. I mean, they have enough guys on the board that are still very highly rated to make it happen. And a lot of the kids that they're going after, this, Ohio State or Georgia or Bama, the schools that are right there with them are also involved, USC, et cetera. All these schools are elite programs going after these same kids. You knock off one, not only do you go up, they go down. Some of these are flips that we're talking about here too. It's not just one way or the other. Some of that's private, but Oregon is not a program to take lightly. They have been on fire on the recruiting trail, and they should be taken very seriously.
For Oregon to go from where they are now, which is the number 5 recruiting class in the 2025 cycle with 15 commits, compared to the number 1 class, which is Ohio State with 23 commits, what would need to happen for Oregon to reach this metric, which is certainly not a given, but as you said, is 100% feasible as long as they land some of the guys we're going to talk about later in the show?
It depends on which network you go by because They do these completely different. Just as an example, the old metric, which I hate, is just point system. Each player is worth X. Well, that doesn't take in class balance. Like you could sign 7 guys at one spot and completely miss on another. It's not a number 1 class or anything close to it. But by points, it can be. On3 does a much more in-depth look at it. They have all kinds of checks and balances. Some might even be a little over the top. It's more reasonable. You can sign 18 kids and have a better recruiting class than somebody that signed 26 because your 18 are the right guys. Very balanced, elite players, et cetera, et cetera. So Oregon, by my metric, it's a little more along the lines of On3. They definitely do. They're not if you go through their class, name a kid, Spencer, you're like, this kid's probably not going to play at Oregon.
In 2025,
their class is pretty good. I have no bias towards Oregon. I'm not an Oregon fan. I'm just like, okay, this kid's good.
Right.
This kid's, you know what I mean? I know a lot of these kids. They're elite players. They can play early, a lot of them. That's bona fide top 5 class, and they're ranked like number 5 or whatever by some of these rankings. It's legit. So how many other classes that are around them are like that? Okay, Georgia, Bama. Those are like automatics. Ohio State. How many others? Like Miami's class has a lot of 3-star kids. Notre Dame's does too, et cetera. There's a lot of schools that want a more long-term projection with some of their recruits. It's a different way to do it, and that's fine. But I like the instant impact guys, especially in the transfer portal area, because kids that you bring in that you have to wait, how often do they stick around? Like these kids have zero patience, which is sad, but that's another story. You don't bring in impact recruits, especially a school like Oregon's got a lot of good players on campus already. How long are they really going to wait? They're not. So that's the other part of it. Does your class stay? That's the thing that we don't talk about publicly with these rankings. I know a lot of the guys that do the rankings at these different sites. It's the very touchy issue. Off the record, we have those conversations like this kid's not going to wait over here. There's no way. We have those conversations in private all the time. Oregon's taking kids that fit their system, that are big-time players, that are going to push the pocket, try to get kids out of the depth chart. Like somebody's going to leave, maybe it's because somebody's just really, really good. That's cool. That happens. I highly doubt Oregon staff's going to care. This is a really good recruiting class, and it's got all the makings of it.
Yeah, I think the 25 class has a lot of players who if you were to tell me, you're sent here from the future and hey, so-and-so is transferring out, I think it's because there are just other talented guys in front of him on the depth chart. I think that's where Oregon is, because they're just stacking these top 5, 10 recruiting classes on top of one another. And to your question about, which of these guys wouldn't play, I don't know. I'd have to look even harder at their film, I guess, but I don't really have a guess right now, because the lowest rated player in the class is Dimitri Manning, an offensive lineman who's 6'6" and a half, 345 pounds. He might not play right away. He probably doesn't play right away. But I mean, you tell me he's never going to be able to get on the field at that side? That seems kind of unlikely. One aspect that has been a recurring theme for Oregon as they are pushing for this highly ranked class is that Ohio State's going after a lot of the same kids. And I don't know if it's a coincidence or not that Oregon goes into the Big Ten and suddenly the Ohio State recruiting battles seem to be every week, whether you're talking Jordan Davison
really
or Jeremiah McLaughlin last year, or, Oregon's been trying to flip 5-star corner and Ohio State commit Naeem Offord. Dorian Brew was seen as an Ohio State lean, and he ends up choosing Oregon. What do you make of Oregon, Ohio State kind of dueling like dragons in House of the Dragon? If you saw episode 4, it was great. On this past episode, that's a thumbs up from Brian. That's 10 thumbs up from me. It was so good.
Yeah,
but what do you make of Oregon, Ohio State going at it for a lot of these same kids seemingly every week?
Part of it's just random, because like we say, pretty much every time I come on your show, Oregon recruits nationally. They touch about every state in some capacity. I'm not surprised. However, I don't know if they're just recruiting the same, like DBs, like they're just after the same guys. Their boards are really similar. That is beyond odd. I don't know why that is, but Oregon's trying to get the best players no matter where they're from, and I support Lanning and going that route. Be who you want to be. But Ohio State, that's a hard team to flip guys from. Oregon's still trying. Offord, different guys. They don't care. Now the question is there anybody that there's a reason for that we can really look at? And I can't find one. I did walked on Buckeyes the other day. We had the same question in reverse. Like, what's going on with, why is there so many? I'm like, I don't know. I have to look more into this, but looking at it a little bit, they're just elite players, and Oregon recruits nationally, and Ohio State always has. So this is kind of the new norm. There'll be a school like this every year. It might be Florida next year. It might be Georgia. It might be Penn State, but like Oregon just got a kid recently from Maryland. Most people thought he was going to Penn State. Did you really think there was going to be many Oregon Penn State battles? The two schools don't have much in proximity.
I mean,
you know what I mean? But they took the kid last year. Like it's just crazy because Oregon recruits every state. They don't have a natural home base, so it's always possible each year. There's at least one school like this.
Yeah, I mean, Oregon Penn State, it's a classic Big Ten matchup if I've ever seen one. One of the kids recently that made the most recruiting news was Dakorien Moore. Ohio State was after him. It was more LSU, Texas, Oregon. He chooses the Ducks. Your reaction to when Dakorien committed was what?
Very surprised. Everybody I was told leading up to about 24 hours or so to maybe 48 hours was Texas. And then, not surprisingly, people around Texas, someone says, we didn't want to spend as much as this. I'm not hearing it. Texas NIL money is ridiculous. Shut up. So that's the first thing. They got more oil money they know what to do with. So the kid just wanted to go against the grain. Texas was the leader by everybody's account for quite a while. I don't know what it was. I don't know him very well. I've met him. I don't know what it was, but that's just an upset. But last year we talked about that with Aiden Breland, McLaughlin, etc. Oregon visits oftentimes change things for kids because it's kind of hard to explain from what I've been told. And I've never visited, but several recruits have told me that. And he just wanted to be different. Good for him because he was going to get a big NIL deal, A&M, LSU. It didn't really matter. I'm sure there's a little variance here and there. I think it's just because he wanted to go to Oregon. That's my guess because, he could have went to Texas at any point. He never committed there, so he wanted to leave the state.
Well, Dakorien Moore is not the last 5-star that Dan Lanning hopes to land in the 2025 cycle. When we return, we're talking about the guys that Oregon is kind of trending for across the board. How many more 5-stars can they get? That's coming up next. Coming up right now, FanDuel, of course. I love sports. I think that's plain and obvious to anybody who listens to or watches this show. And I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that I am in the mood. And you can do the same. This summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long, kind of like this podcast. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. And if you want to bet anything related to Oregon, yeah, they've got that too. Go check out FanDuel at FanDuel.com. So Oregon has 2 5-stars committed, both on the offensive side of the football, both at wide receiver in Dakorien Moore and Dallas Wilson, number 1 receiver in Texas, number 1 receiver in the state of Florida. They're both going to play college football at Oregon as of now. Of course, Dallas Wilson is getting a pretty sizable amount of recruitment from other schools, but so far I've not seen or heard anything to indicate he's heading elsewhere. But Dan Lanning, if he's going to get a number 1 class or push to have the number 1 class in the country, probably going to need multiple more 5-stars, and Oregon is trending, according to On3 at least, in the direction of several of these guys. So let's start with DJ Pickett, because this is seeming like it is coming down. You know, someone who's right in your backyard, Brian. This seems like it is coming down to Oregon and our old friend Mario Cristobal and the Miami Hurricanes.
It's ironic because at the early juncture of this, I thought he was going to go to LSU for whatever reason, and maybe it's a smokescreen. There has been very little to no LSU buzz with DJ for quite a while. And he knows the DB coach there extremely well. He was at UF last year, and he's been recruiting DJ for a long time. So if it ends up being Miami or Oregon, I mean, I would lean Miami just because he's got proximity and his cousin just signed with there. But like, again, we always say with Oregon, you just don't know. And he liked it a lot on the visits, and they've been in it throughout. He's tweeted a lot of stuff about Oregon. So I've heard different takes on it. I haven't talked to him recently. I might go down to his commitment ceremony, but it's an interesting deal, man. I would not want to touch this one with the prediction, putting money on it. I can say that.
Brian's phone is literally ringing off the hook with so much insight and juice on the recruiting trail. It's why we bring it. It's why we bring him on the show, because everybody wants to get his attention, and we're of course happy to have it here. But for Pickett, you know, is this a tough sell for him to go from Florida all the way to Oregon? And to your knowledge, is Dallas Wilson involved at all in trying to get him to go up to Oregon? Does it ease the mind of recruits at all when they see someone from their state also going to a school that is so far from home?
Well, they're both from the Tampa area. They know each other. I mean, I'm sure he's trying to get him to go. And to that point, Zaire Addison's a Tampa kid too. He's committed to Oregon. They're all going to try to get him to go because DJ's been the chosen one. Like everybody knew for a long time, he was the guy in the air. Like that was not really in debate. But if you want to win, you want to get as many good players as you can. So that's yes. I haven't asked Dallas or anything like that, but common sense will tell you the answer there. They all know each other. As far as him leaving, DJ's a different kid. He's real quiet. He doesn't really care what's going on. He just competes, doesn't say much. He just goes out and dominates and walks off the field. It doesn't matter where he's at. I don't think distance would bother him as much as most kids from Florida. He's more mature, smarter than most. He just kind of cerebral about everything he does. I don't think that's going to play much of a factor.
DJ Pickett has set his commitment date for July 17th. That is a week from when this show is airing. So midweek, we'll know around this time next week, assuming he doesn't change or alter anything, which is Brian knows very well. That can tend to happen with kids from time to time, and Brian loves it more than anything, I can just tell. But that's not the only 5-star defensive back that Oregon is pursuing here. Trey McNutt, one of the top safeties in the country, another guy that Oregon is after. What can you tell us about the latest on his recruitment?
Everything still is kind of like, is he really going to go to Oregon? Like, I did not see that coming.
On3 thinks so. They've logged a prediction for him.
I know. I mean, like you don't promote that for fun, especially when it's a kid that a lot of people thought were going somewhere else. Says you will be made fun of in the industry. Trust me on this, by the way. I'm as surprised as you, but I have not gotten like that phone call. I haven't got anybody to tell me that wasn't a legit option. And again, I'm surprised by it as much as anybody else, but I never pick Oregon for anybody because it's about impossible to project who they're going to get. But now I'm to the point where I'm just going to pick Oregon because it's easier.
Yeah, I don't think it's an accident that Oregon's going after the secondary or guys that can play safety with where the roster is at right now, because you have a bunch of corners in the room, not just now, but going forward. The safety room's a lot thinner. You know, you've got your 2 starters this year, but there's going to be someone with a freshman next to their name, whether it's a true or red shirt, that remains to be seen, that is a part of the rotation this year. But after this season, Kobe Savage is out of eligibility, and Tysheem Johnson is out of eligibility, and you're suddenly looking at, 2 new safeties. Yeah, you can always go to the transfer portal, but I think this is a position group that Dan Lanning and company want to load up on, and, whether or not they would go to the portal might depend on how many of these guys they get, because, 5 stars tend to have a greater chance of playing right away. Doesn't mean other guys can't. We see it all the time. But is McNutt that sort of player to you where he steps on campus and can go be a starting football player right away?
I don't know about starting, but I think he can be in the rotation. Like, starting at safety is more than the physical credibility that they come in with, because it's about calling defenses and knowing where to be. And if you're wrong, it's a touchdown. Coaches hate freshmen in the deep secondary as a general rule for a good reason. I understand. And McNutt can play. But even DJ Pickett, who might play safety, I have as much trust in him as anybody because I've known him for so long. I don't want him starting a free safety at Oregon. There's too much responsibility. So work him into the lineup, sure. I would still wager heavily that they try to get at least one transfer that can compete for the starting job, because you just don't want freshmen in that role. But he's talented. Like, physically, could he? Sure. It's the mental stuff with safety that's always rough.
Along the defensive back lines, but also kind of hybrid linebacker, Jonah Williams is another guy who it seems like Oregon's trending for, and he's another 5-star player. The last update I had kind of heard, and I think On3 was again the one that made me jot this down to talk to you about on today's show. They logged a prediction for him to go to Oregon, and I thought this was a Texas A&M recruit, or that he was going to be, but what's going on here? He's a safety linebacker hybrid, Jeff Bossa type player. But again, he's got all 5 of those stars next to his name, and that garners a lot of attention.
Baseball might be the problem there. A&M's coach just went to Texas. He wants to play both sports.
Oh, I forgot. That's right.
This is the one of that guy was getting ready to coach like the national championship or whatever. And
he did coach in the national championship.
And he took the job for the other school.
They were in game 3 of the final of the College World Series. And Jim Schlossnagle, once mentioned on this show, because Oregon played him in the Super Regionals, that he left and went to Texas, of all places.
That tells me that he just wanted to be at Texas, period.
Could be.
But that also impacts this kid, because he's not going somewhere unless he can play both. Now, I have no idea how good Oregon's program is going to be going moving forward.
Should be very good. They've been to back-to-back Super Regionals for the first time ever. Mark Wazakowski just got, I think he got a little bit of an extension. It might have been a performance bonus. I forget, but he's got, at the very least, it is not an afterthought. It's a program that has significantly elevated in the last couple of years. I mean, you go to back-to-back Super Regionals, that's, going to back-to-back Sweet 16s or Elite 8s. That's essentially what that is in the basketball terms, and that program has got a lot of young talent and should be very good again next year. They've added a couple pieces in the transfer portal, and he's also got the precedent of Bryce Betcher playing both football and baseball, and Betcher was a starting center fielder and a rotational linebacker for the Ducks this past year. And he might get drafted in the Major League Draft, which is next week.
I think all that right there plays into it. You got the proven commodity as the coach, extension. Obviously, football's good at Oregon. A&M's got a new coach. He's good, but he's still a new coach. And the baseball coach is leaving. There's just less uncertainty with Oregon. I'm guessing that's part of the reason for the pick. They're just using math here. But maybe he's literally told somebody, and it's leaked out too. But I get it. Like, if you're dead set on playing baseball, and he's apparently very good, if Oregon A&M are recruiting him. they're kind of self-explanatory, then I get it. So, you know what? In today's era, man, kids go all over the country. This legitimacy with region and area is no longer legitimate. Kids go everywhere. So I would not be surprised.
We've still got one more segment, and it's about the 2024 recruiting class. Which kids do Brian and I think have the best NFL prospects from this incoming highest ever ranked recruiting class for Oregon? We will talk about that next. All right, Brian, let's talk 2024. And I have a couple names in mind for which guy in the 2024 class is most likely to make himself into an early round NFL draft pick based on his tape and position, and also kind of what his career trajectory could be at Oregon. I'll let you go first, though. If you had to pick one player in the 2024 class that becomes a first or second round NFL draft pick, who would you take?
Aiden Breland.
Aiden Breland. No hesitation there. Why?
I've met him, so that's cheating. Personality matters with this stuff. Like everything that you've done in the last 10 years, they will go through every tweet, everything you've said, etc. Breland will be fine. Modern day kid. He understands media. He understands road trips, big games, all that. Doesn't bother him. He knows how to relate to any of that, and he's a team guy, even though he's freakazoid. Those things scream NFL in general, and he's a D tackle that can rush the passer. This is not hard.
Well, Brian says it's not hard. I'm going to try to make it hard for you anyway and just pose a couple other names in there. Elijah Rushing is a really, really intriguing prospect to me. Edge guys tend to be players that get drafted in the first round. I mean, nowadays the first round is essentially made up of quarterbacks, receivers, offensive tackles, and edge rushers. That is the overwhelming majority of first-round NFL draft picks. I think it's not impossible for an interior guy like Breland to work his way into that position, but Rushing is a guy who I don't even know how much he plays this year because Oregon's edge room is just so unbelievably stacked. I mean, they've got Mateo Uiagalelei and Blake Purchase and Tatum Tuioti all back with Amarion Winston as well. I think playing time there could be challenging for a guy as a true freshman, and maybe he's somebody who pops a little bit more come 2025. But the edge position, that's definitely one that stood out to me. But another name that I couldn't shake is Shaq McCroy, because if he gets himself into an athletic profile and conditioning to where he is maximizing his size, boy, that just could scream early round NFL draft tackle to me.
He's one of the biggest guys I've ever met. The last time I saw him, he was 390. So
that's a lot. That's a lot of weight.
He needs to lose some weight, but he can still move. Like he told me he was 360 something. I was told else by somebody I trust more. A little different number there, but he could still move. Like I saw him at the Under Armour game. I'm like, okay, yeah, he's pretty darn good. So yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. My other pick is a corner, Dakota Fields. It's because where he's from and his length profile. The NFL, especially like the Seahawks, the long corners cover three. Some man, there's some, it's complex.
Richard Sherman, Brandon Browner, Byron Maxwell back in the day. Now Pete Carroll's not there anymore. I'm a Seahawks fan, if you did not know.
Oh, okay.
So
well,
I'm incredibly familiar. Right.
And I think most, not necessarily all, but most NFL teams, if they have 5 guys on the board at corner, most of them are going to be at least 6'1". This kid's listed at 6'2", so he's probably 6'1". And he can move, and he played at Sarah, which is a good program. California, he's going to be used to competition. It means something there. Like he's had this process going up, and now he's going to Oregon. So they, their room is not necessarily going to be easy to break into, but he'll eventually get there. So I think he's really talented, and he fits the NFL profile.
Yeah, another guy I wonder about is Aaron Flowers, because he stood out in the spring game.
Yeah.
He's really, he just looks so physically ready as a true freshman, and that's a rare thing. Even in the secondary, sometimes guys look a little bit thin or maybe a step slower. They're not processing. I was really impressed with what he put on film in the spring game, and I'm curious to see if he's one of those guys that plays this year on the back end as a rotational guy in the safety room. And if he does, I think his potential is really high. I think that's a really tough position to turn yourself into an early round NFL draft pick. That's why I went with, Rushing and McCroy for my picks, because edge rusher, tackle, those are premium spots. And those guys are high level talents. I think, frankly, of the two that I picked, I think Rushing would be the more likely of the two, just because he's coming into college this year at 6'6", 250. And I mean, that body doesn't need any work. Like, he's ready to go right now. He's just got to learn, how to play the position and how to develop an extra pass rushing move or two.
I mean, there's always more you can do weight room wise, but yeah, he's a pretty unique kid. The pass rush stuff, he's got to get through the guys to get there, and they've already got experience. But the frame is there, recruited nationally. Yeah, there's no doubt Rushing is certainly capable. Now we just got to see if he can do it, because the physical gifts are there.
Well, and we'll see if he's on the field come this fall as well. Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network, brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Brian, thanks as always.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.